Okay, so let's dive straight into this. Prince Harry's ongoing battle with the UK Home Office regarding his security.
Mm.
It took another significant step recently, didn't it?
It did, yeah. That appeal hearing around April 9th, I think, at London's Royal Court of Justice.
And the immediate reaction, Harry's own statement, I mean, that really made waves.
Absolutely. Describing himself as exhausted and overwhelmed, that alone tells you something about the personal cost, right? But then he went further, suggesting the public would be shocked by things being withheld and saying his worst fears have been confirmed. That's strong language. It hints at something much deeper going on.
It really does. So just to quickly recap for everyone listening, this whole thing really boils down to the removal of his automatic police protection in the UK.
Right, after he and Meghan stepped back as working royals, which was, early 2020?
Exactly. And, we have to remember, his kids are involved. Now, Prince Archie is 5, Princess Lilibet is 3. So you can see why it's such a big deal for him as a father.
Yep.
So the mission for us today, in this deep dive, is to really try and unpack this whole messy situation. We want to understand Harry's side, what's driving him.
And the other perspectives, too. The palace, the government bodies involved.
Yeah, and crucially, how all this is affecting his relationship with King Charles. We've looked at quite a few sources to try and get to the heart of it.
And what really jumps out right from the beginning is how strongly Harry feels about this.
Yeah.
Sources suggest he doesn't see the security decision as just bureaucratic shuffling. He seems to view it as a deliberate move.
A calculated move. To stop them leaving their royal roles, is that the idea?
That seems to be his belief, yeah. It points to this deep suspicion, maybe, a feeling that forces were working against their departure.
Wow. Why do you think that particular idea that it was calculated is so central for him?
That's a really good question. Maybe it comes from a feeling of being, trapped or managed within the system.
Right, like if he thought his family's safety was being used as a kind of bargaining chip.
Exactly. That would definitely fuel a sense of injustice, wouldn't it? Make him want to fight it. And it also sounds like he genuinely thought he was guaranteed protection for life.
His lawyers certainly pushed that point hard in court.
Yeah.
They framed it as a breach of expectation.
They did. And they brought up some really serious threats, too, didn't they? Things he's apparently facing.
Yeah, they mentioned threats from neo-Nazi groups, even Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
That really ramps up the stakes, showing the kind of danger they believe he's in.
And their main legal argument seems to be that RVC, that's the committee that handles royal security.
Right, the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures.
Yeah, them. His lawyers claim RVC didn't actually follow its own rules. They say there wasn't a proper threat and risk assessment done before they downgraded his security.
So it's not just about whether he needs security. It's about how they decided he didn't need the automatic kind anymore. The process itself.
Precisely. What kind of checks and balances are usually involved in those kinds of decisions?
Well, from what we can gather, a proper threat assessment usually looks at credible dangers, the potential impact if something happened, and the person's vulnerabilities.
Okay.
So Harry's team is basically saying, look, you didn't do that properly, which makes the whole decision invalid from the start.
And that fits with what Richard Fitzwilliams, the royal expert, described as Harry feeling like a victim of injustice. It all ties together.
Yeah, it does. And then Jenny Bond, the former BBC royal correspondent, she adds another layer to it.
Oh, yeah. What's her take?
She suggests that Harry's determination here isn't only about making sure it's safe to bring Archie and Lilibet to the UK. I mean, obviously that's huge for any parent.
Of course.
But Bond thinks there's something else driving him, too. Like a need to prove he was right.
Right, to show that his worries were justified and that maybe there was some kind of effort to keep him sort of trapped in the royal fold.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
It adds this element of personal vindication. It's not just about bodyguards.
Yeah, it's about getting his narrative, his experience acknowledged. Validated.
And that lines up with Harry himself saying this security fight is actually more important to him than his other legal cases.
Which really tells you how deeply he feels about it. And underneath it all, of course, is that very real, practical worry. Can he bring Meghan and the kids here safely without police protection?
He wants them to know their British roots. He said that. But safety has to come first.
Understandably.
Okay, let's flip the coin now. What about King Charles?
Yeah.
And the rest of the royal family? How are they seeing all this? It sounds like it's caused a lot of friction.
Oh, definitely. One royal insider apparently called the effect on Harry's relationship with his father terrible.
Terrible. Wow.
Yeah, and even said Harry blames Charles directly, believes his father could step in and fix the security thing if he wanted to.
But there's another side to that, isn't there? From the same insider.
Right. The counter-argument is that Charles feels like he actually can't interfere, that it's RAVX's decision to make.
So, RAVEC being this sort of independent body responsible for the protocols, Charles is saying it's out of his hands.
That seems to be the position, yes. And that difference in perspective, who actually has the power here, looks like a major source of the tension.
And you can see the impact on their relationship. They haven't seen each other since, what, early 2024?
That's right. And they didn't meet when Harry was briefly in London in April, even though Charles was there too initially.
Okay, Charles had medical treatment and then went to Italy, but still.
Yeah.
The lack of a meeting speaks volumes.
It does. And Richard Fitzwilliams paints an even bleaker picture.
What does he say?
He reported that Charles isn't even answering Harry's messages, which is pretty stark.
Yeah. No relationship currently, basically.
That's Fitzwilliams' assessment. And he thinks Harry sees this lack of action on security from his dad as a kind of personal betrayal.
A betrayal. Heavy stuff.
It really is. But then you have Marlene Koenig, the royal historian, offering a bit of a different angle.
Okay.
She sort of questions whether Harry's stance comes across as a bit entitled.
Entitled. How so?
She used this analogy, like if you leave the family business, you can't automatically expect to keep all the company perks and security details. It's quite a pointed comparison.
It is provocative.
Yeah.
It sort of highlights the idea that stepping back, becoming a non-working royal, inevitably changes things. The level of automatic support.
Exactly. And Koenig makes the point that Charles can't just wave a magic wand and arrange security outside the proper channels.
Right.
She points out other royals who aren't full-time working royals also had security changes. They get protection for official duties, but not 2047 like before.
So it underscores that difference between being on duty for the public and living a private life, even if you're royal.
Pretty much. The argument is Harry and Meghan chose a different path, so the rules around publicly funded automatic UK protection changed for them. Now it's assessed case by case when they visit.
And Fitzwilliams also mentioned Harry's public comments after the hearing, hinting about secrets and confirmed fears. He suggested that probably doesn't help rebuild trust with the family.
No, he used the word paranoia, even, to describe the vibe around those accusations. It suggests a real lack of confidence, probably on both sides.
You can't ignore the baggage from the past, can you?
Definitely not. Sources say the family, Charles, William, Kate, are all still feeling the impact of things Harry said in interviews, and obviously in his book, Spare.
That trust has been seriously damaged.
Hugely, Fitzwilliams put it bluntly. The royal family does not trust Harry.
Wow.
And one possible reason he suggested is this worry that private chats might somehow end up being used in court later on.
God, that makes any kind of open conversation almost impossible, doesn't it?
It creates a really, really difficult dynamic for trying to mend fences.
And then there was that surprise trip Harry made to Ukraine in April.
Yeah.
That apparently caused more issues.
Yeah, reports suggested the timing wasn't great. It apparently risked overshadowing King Charles's state visit to Italy, which was happening around the same time.
So seen as insensitive, perhaps, or just a lack of coordination?
Possibly both. It just adds another layer of complication. So let's maybe circle back to RAVEC for a second. We know they're in charge of security for royals and public figures. What exactly was the trigger for their decision about Harry back in 2020?
Well, the key date seems to be February 28th, 2020. That was shortly after Harry and Meghan officially stepped down from their roles.
Okay.
And RVS decided that providing automatic metropolitan police protection wasn't appropriate anymore, given they weren't working royals and were living abroad.
Right. So instead of the automatic cover, they offered this bespoke arrangement. What does that actually mean day to day?
Good question. Bespoke here basically means security tailored to the specific visit. It depends on an assessment of the threat level at that time.
So not continuous.
No. And it means Harry and Meghan have to give notice apparently 30 days before they plan to come to the UK.
Okay.
Then each trip gets its own threat assessment to decide what security I needed. It's a massive change from what he had before.
It's a huge shift. And that's what Harry's fighting in court, that change.
Essentially, yes. His lawyers are arguing everything messed up the process before they even made that change. That they didn't do the proper threat, risk, and impact assessment first. They're challenging how the decision was reached.
Got it. And it's worth remembering, I suppose, the wider picture here.
Hope so.
Well, Harry pays for his own security in the U.S., right, where they live most of the time.
That's right, yeah.
But Fitzwilliams also brought up the deep trauma around Princess Diana's death, the crash, the paparazzi pursuit.
Of course. That must cast such a long shadow over how he views risk and security for his own wife and kids.
Absolutely. And Harry himself has said he thinks the risk to his family is even greater than it was for his mother.
Greater? Why?
He mentioned additional layers of racism and extremism and specifically pointed to that past threat from al-Qaeda. These are clearly very deep-seated fears for him.
Understandable fears, given everything. And this legal fight isn't over yet, is it?
No, not at all. The results of this appeal hearing won't be known until after Easter 2025, so this is going to drag on.
Feels like it. And meanwhile, the communication breakdown between Harry and Charles seems pretty complete.
Yeah, Marlene Koenig saying they're not in communication. That's quite definitive. She also floated the idea that maybe Charles and his team are trying a bit of tough love.
Tough love. Like hoping the pressure makes Harry rethink his approach.
Perhaps. Maybe encouraging him to step back from the public and legal challenges.
But then you hear from that other insider who says Charles does want to mend things with Harry.
Right, wants to ease the tension, but feels like his hands are tied on the security issue because it's RAV Tech's domain.
It paints this picture of a father stuck, doesn't it?
Does.
Between his son's obvious distress and the rules of the institution he leads.
It does. And Jenny Bond made a really important point about just how awkward this is for the king.
How so?
Well, Harry is suing his own government, the king's government. That puts Charles in an extraordinarily difficult position, as she put it.
Yeah, I can see how that would make personal chats incredibly tricky.
Definitely complicates things. And Bond also wondered, kind of looking back, if Harry really thought through the potential damage this legal route could do to his relationship with his father when he started down this path.
A very good question. Did he weigh that up?
Makes you wonder about the long game, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so wrapping this up, it seems the core tension is really this clash between Harry's deep sense of injustice, his worries about his family's safety, their connection to the UK,
versus the royal family's stance, which seems focused on his non-working status and the official protocols for taxpayer-funded security.
And the result is this widening gap between Harry and King Charles. Unanswered messages, different ideas about who even can fix the security problem. It's a direct consequence of this fundamental clash.
It really throws into sharp relief how complicated things get when very personal fears and anxieties run up against institutional rules and, frankly, money.
Yeah. For Harry, it's clearly emotional. It's about protecting his kids.
While for the monarchy, there are these bigger questions about precedent, public funds, procedure, just very different worlds colliding.
So that leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought to chew on. Given how dug in everyone seems, the personal feelings involved for Harry, the public nature of it all, what could a realistic resolution even look like?
Is there a path forward? What would it take to bridge this gap?
Exactly. What are the key things that would need to happen? And honestly, is it even possible at this stage? Something to think about, considering all the different viewpoints and the potential long-term effects on this family.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more updates on this developing story.